Good evening. We call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Bristol, Virginia City Council today, Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. Please join us for a moment of silence. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, thank you all for joining us this evening. We've got a pretty packed agenda. Our first item is Mayor's Minute and Council comments. Are there any comments from the Council?
I have one. I'd just like to say and recognize, I know Major League Baseball kicked off this week, and I'd just like to recognize Justin Grimm, another one that's our locally went to Virginia High, came through our Bristol Little League system, who is now playing for the Oakland A's and had an appearance for the A's and has an ERA of 0. So super proud of him, and just want to recognize one of our hometown heroes that's out there playing Major League Baseball, and tell you to watch him anytime you can.
Absolutely. It's great that he's representing us well. City Manager comments.
Council and members of the public, I do want to take a few moments to respond to some postings that were on social media over the weekend in regards to my salary. 2 employees are paid out of the city manager department salary line item. That is not entirely all my salary. Secondly, my salary is split between city manager and city attorney, with the largest portion being paid from the city manager line item. There are no payments to me or my law firm charged or budgeted to professional services within the city attorney department. My entire salary is classified as salary either through city attorney or city manager in the budget. And the fiscal year 22 budget contains a 5% salary increase for my position, no more than recommended for other city employees.
Thank you. All right. Before we get into our regular agenda, we have matters to be presented by members of the public, non-agenda items, and these are items not on the agenda. Just a quick reminder, when I call your name, everybody has 3 minutes to be able to speak. If you'll come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record, the green light will come on. As your time is getting close to finish, the yellow light will come on, and when your time is up, the red light will come on. We ask you to be respectful of your time and each other's. The first person that signed up for a non-agenda item is Mr. Michael Pollard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm glad that we no longer have to wear masks in here. It's a lot easier to speak into the microphone that way. I have a question, and whether or not you can answer it right now, that's fine. I know that you're not normally set up to do so. The budget has a fairly large item, which was noted in the newspaper for liner mobilization. If I remember right, it's neighborhood of $4 million. There's normally a line item for accrual for the liner, and I was wondering if the liner mobilization is the normal liner extension that it has come due a little bit earlier and a little more expensive than normal, and as such, the annual accrual would become redundant, or if that's something similar or something different. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll definitely get with city staff and clarify and get back with you about that. The next person that signed up for a non-agenda item is Mr. Craig Widener.
Hi, I'm Craig Widener. I live literally on the other side of State Street, so I'm a Tennessee resident. But I want to address the council this evening. I spoke with you about a couple of months ago about the landfill. I know there's been lots of buzz about the landfill from outside groups who really don't know what they're talking about, but what have you. Living downtown, I will tell you that I used to smell the landfill probably 3-4 times a week, and it could get pretty pungent. I'm just here to recognize that you've stayed the course. You've done what the the experts have told you to do. You've drowned out all the outside noise. Over the last month, I've smelled the landfill maybe once every 2 weeks downtown. So whatever we're doing, you're doing it right. Thank you for that. Thank you for drowning out all the people that don't know what they're talking about and doing what you knew you should do, what the experts told you to do. It's working. As a citizen of just downtown Bristol, I appreciate that. I just wanted to commend you for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Widener. That's the last person that signed up for non-agenda items. Now we're looking for a motion from our council to adopt our agenda.
I would like to make a motion that we adopt the agenda with the following changes. That we pull items number 10 and 11 from the consent agenda out and consider them as a separate agenda item together.
Second.
A motion and a second to adopt our agenda with the change noted. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnham.
Yes. The first item of our regular agenda, a proclamation to proclaim April 10th through 16th, 2022 as National Animal Control Public Officer Appreciation Week. No one signed up for public comment for this item. Staff report.
Council, is noted in the agenda item, this week is National Animal Control Officer Appreciation Week, and we have a proclamation to present tonight to our Animal Control Officer, Larry Boardwine.
And we'll have the reading of the proclamation. Would you like to?
Whereas the National Animal Control Association has designated the second week of April each year as Animal Control Officer Appreciation Week, and whereas the various federal and state and local government officials throughout the country take this time to recognize, thank, and commend all animal control officers for their dedicated service they provide to citizens, various public safety, public service agencies, and departments throughout the country, and whereas the City of Bristol would like to express its sincere thanks and appreciation for the outstanding service the Bristol Police Department's animal control officers provide on a daily basis to the citizens of the city, and whereas the Bristol Council recognizes and commends the animal control officers for the many dedicated and long hours of service they provide in order to serve this community, and for their commitment to providing the highest and most efficient level of customer service. And whereas the Bristol City Council wishes to commend each of the animal control officers for their service, which is in keeping with the long and distinguished tradition of the animal control profession, therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Bristol does hereby officially recognize the week of April 10th through the 16th, 2022 as Animal Control Officer Appreciation Week, and respectfully ask all citizens to join in expressing their sincere thanks, gratitude, and appreciation for the outstanding service and quality performance these individuals provide throughout the year to assure the safety and welfare of all. Adopted this 12th day of April, 2022.
Okay, thank you. And just to recognize, we have, let's see, Chief Austin, Major Milligan, and both animal control officers, Boardwine and Boughton here this evening.
I'm
And,
sorry I didn't see you back there.
What's the pleasure of the council?
I move for approval of the proclamation as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any council discussion?
I'll just say very briefly. I've not had the opportunity to speak with Officer Boardwine before, but Officer Boughton, that I've talked with her several times. I've taken cat food up there a little bit, and I took a cat home with me one time when I went up there. So she's a wonderfully dedicated public servant, and I feel like she loves what she does, and she has a passion for it, and I appreciate her service.
We have a motion and a second to accept the proclamation. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnham.
Yes. And if it's okay, if I can call all of you up and we'll present this to you and take a photo. The next item of our agenda is a proclamation to proclaim April 10th through 16th, 2022, also as National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. No one signed up for public comment for this item. Staff report.
Council, as previously mentioned, this is National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, or otherwise known as dispatchers, and we have a proclamation to recognize this week for their service as well.
Okay. We'll have a reading of the proclamation.
Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property, and whereas the safety of our police officers and firefighters is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the City of Bristol's Emergency Communications Center. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are the single vital link for our police officers and firefighters by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information, and ensuring their safety. And whereas public safety telecommunicators of the Bristol E911 Communications Center have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. And whereas each dispatcher has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism
during the performance of their job in the past year. Therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of Bristol, Virginia declares the week of April 10th through the 16th, 2022 to be National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in the City of Bristol in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our city and citizens safe, adopted this 12th day of April, 2022.
Okay. Thank you. What's the pleasure of the council?
I move for adoption of the proclamation as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any council discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnum,
Yes. And we have Chief Austin and Major Milligan here as well, I believe, to accept this. The next item of our agenda is the jail discussion. Nobody signed up for public comment for this item, so staff report.
Council, this is just to clarify where we stand in regards to the transition from the city jail to the regional jail. I think for a period of time there were people who believed there may be another vote needed by council in order to approve the city joining the regional jail. However, the resolution that was adopted last year approved the joinder, entering into the amended service agreement, and executing the support agreement required by VRA and any other agreements or certificates related to existing VRA financings. At the time, the VRA amendment agreement was not included. At the time Bristol approved their resolution, as that agreement had not been fully worked out with VRA yet. However, our resolution did approve any agreement or certificate needed in connection with the joinder and requirements related to the existing Southwest Virginia Regional Jail financings. Next, all of the existing members have adopted resolutions in January of this year. These resolutions approve similar provisions: Bristol's joinder, execution of the amended service agreement, plus an acknowledgement to the VRA amendment agreement. And at this point, VRA does not need any other approvals from the City Council in order to continue with the transition from the city jail to the regional jail. We would anticipate the transition to be completed on or about June 30th.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for City Manager?
I do have a question. So in the budget that you presented last week, there was a line item, I think, for about $500,000 for transportation costs.
Yes.
I was under the impression that the regional jail was coming to pick the inmates up.
Those transportation costs are for the transportation that it will take for us once we arrest an arrestee to take them to the regional jail.
So our officers will be taking them from Bristol to Abingdon.
Our officers will be going from Bristol to Abingdon.
Will those be police officers or sheriff's deputies?
Police officers.
How will that affect our staffing? Like, because I know some of the people I've talked to with the police department, the sheriff's department, depending on what the processing is at the regional jail, they could be there for several hours, right? So how will that affect our staffing when we need people on the streets?
I think the regional jail would tell you that it typically takes 20 to 40 minutes for someone to be processed. You know, Chief Alston is here. If you have any questions in regards to that. However, they have done a couple of trial runs. I know beginning May 1st, they're going to continue to do trial runs throughout the entire month of May so that we can be ready come July 1 and work out any kinks associated with that. You know, at this point, if an officer arrests someone and they're booking someone in at the jail, currently, they would have the ability, if needed, to go assist other officers in the city. If they're at the regional jail, they're not going to have that ability to respond as quickly. However, you know, we do have staffing, I think, that is capable of handling situations that arise, and if the need arises, I'm sure we could have an officer leave the regional jail to come back to the city of Bristol for a period of time.
As a follow-up question that maybe is sort of related, I know that originally my understanding was in the agreement that we would purchase 2 transport vans for the regional jail.
That's correct.
So we won't be using these, we're just giving these vans to them?
No, we will be using those vans.
We will be,
Those
so
will
we're
be vans
purchasing.
that will transport inmates from the regional jail to court basically every day here in the city of Bristol.
So they're not we're gonna use the police cars to go up there and then they'll use the vans that we purchased to bring them back here?
That's correct. So, you know, if tonight you go out and decide to commit a crime and Chief Austin decides to take you to the regional jail, he'll take you in his patrol car, but when your court date is set, they'll bring you back down in one of the transportation vans.
And the other surrounding localities, I can't remember how many are part of the regional jail authority, but
There's currently 10 other surrounding localities part of the regional jail authority.
they all essentially do the same procedure. If you're arrested in that particular locality, they take you to the regional
I think
jail.
it's on a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, officers take an individual to the regional jail, drop them off, and then get back into their respective jurisdiction.
Okay. All right. Hearing no further questions or discussion, we appreciate you, and we'll move on to the next item. The joint public hearing with the Planning Commission for Zoning Map Amendment 01-2022, 780 Gate City Highway. I hereby open our public hearing, and I'll ask the Chair of the Planning Commission to open their hearing as well.
I hereby open the public hearing with the City Council and Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. And there was one person who signed up for public comment, and I believe that is the property owner, Mr. Felty. If you'd like to come up and speak, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for your time. I signed up basically just if you guys have any questions or anything.
Okay. And I'll go ahead and throw it over to Mr. Dietrich, and if we do have any questions, we may ask you, but we'll go ahead and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and Planning Commission. Staff has received a request for a zoning map amendment for 780 Gate City Highway. This is tax map parcels 22-2, 1-1, 1A, 2, 3, and 4, 22-7, 1, 18A. The request is to have the property rezoned from R2, which is single and 2-family residential, to B3 General Business District. The applicant is Mike Felty of Felty Insurance Company, Felty Properties LLC, and as you see, he is here tonight. The process, I'll just go through that real quick. Section 50-17 of the City Code details the process for an applicant to present a zoning map amendment request to be heard by Planning Commission and City Council. The item will first be considered by the Planning Commission at a regularly scheduled meeting. Following its review, a joint public hearing will be held with the City Council City Council in accordance with Virginia state law. The item will then be considered again by the Planning Commission at a regularly scheduled meeting to consider a recommendation to the City Council. Council will then approve or deny the request. If approved, there will be 2 ordinance readings by the council. The joint public hearing shall also require notice to be provided to adjoining property owners pursuant to State Statute 15.2.2204, as well as advertised twice in the newspaper. This item was advertised in the Bristol Herald Courier on March 28th, 2022, and on April 4th, 2022. Adjoining property owner notices were mailed on April 4th, 2022, and a sign was placed on the property advertising the public hearing on March 28th, 2022. There have been no previous similar zoning map amendment requests for this property to the knowledge of city staff. A special use permit was granted for this property by the City Council on December 9th, 2014, so that a professional office could operate in the R2 district. This is the use that is currently in use today. So the existing land use, professional office. The future land use map designation is for regional commercial. The size of the site, it's 6 parcels and it's approximately 2.18 acres. As you can see on the map, the location and the property zoning, the red is the B3, the yellow is the R2, and of course just across the street there on Vita and Gate City Highway, the City Council previously approved a rezoning, and it has gone into effect. The zoning map just hasn't yet been updated. Property photos from the front, from across the street on Gate City Highway, and in the rear of the property. This is the survey of the property. Like I said, there are 6 lots involved. This, of course, just shows the outer boundary of all of them. So you can see where the driveway is, where the building is on the property. It's estimated that the property has 265 linear feet of road frontage on Gate City Highway and 300 feet on Veda Drive. The property is the current location of Felty Insurance. It is on the corner of Gate City Highway and Veda Drive, and it's mostly level. Access to the property is Veda Drive, is where the driveway is from Gate City Highway. Existing water and sewer service are unknown at this time, but will be updated with the final staff report after BVU has submitted any additional comments that I have not yet received. Any required utility extension would come at the expense of the owner. The existing uses bordering the subject property to the southwest are a hotel and the future casino to the southeast, office uses to the northwest, and a bank across Gate City Highway to the northeast. The area, as you can see, is a mix of residential and commercial properties. Excuse me. Legislative authority, section 50-17 of the code, City Code, and section 15.2, 2285, and 2286 of the Virginia State Code allow for a process to amend the zoning ordinance, including zoning map amendments. Section 15.2286 states that the governing body may, by ordinance, amend regulations, district boundaries, or classifications of property due to public necessity, convenience, general welfare, or good zoning practice. Compatibility with the neighboring land uses and the effects on community character. The subject property, as mentioned before, is bordered by a mix of residential, commercial, and office uses, and it has itself been an office use for the last 7.5 to 8 years. The purpose of the B3 district is to provide a place for business uses that do not require a central location. It shall provide areas for the development of retail and personal service, commercial, community, and regional shopping centers of integrated design, and high-density development of commercial businesses in certain areas adjacent to major transportation arteries or thoroughfares within the city. As far as consistency with the 2017 comprehensive plan, the 2017 plan addresses future commercial development of the former Bristol Mall site. However, a casino had not been in the works when the plan was approved. So the objective number 1 of the Commercial and Employment Area Framework Plan encourages promotion of commercial reinvestment along Gate City Highway. Objective 5 encourages leveraging Bristol's many unique assets to increase tourism and visitors to the city. The future land use map, which was updated in 2019, shows the subject property as regional commercial. This land use designation is to encourage establishments that draw from a regional consumer traveling along 81, as opposed to the local commercial land use category that is intended to provide daily goods and services conveniently to nearby neighborhoods. Therefore, the request is kind of in line with the future land use map. As far as the impacts, the proposed use is currently unknown. Traffic volume generated by this request is not anticipated to be a problem since Gate City Highway is currently running below capacity. However, future traffic with the addition of the casino and other associated businesses is certain to increase. A traffic impact analysis is scheduled to be performed for the Gate City Highway corridor as well as other areas of potential impact. This study is expected to begin within the next 30 to 60 days. So we have been in talks with Hard Rock and their consultants, and we are in the process of beginning this impact analysis. This will tell us what needs to be done out there, if anything, to account for the casino and any potential businesses that will arise around it. As far as natural resources, there should be no adverse impacts on natural resources if the proposed rezoning is allowed. City staff will require all environmental related permitting to be obtained and approved prior to development, including soil and erosion control and stormwater management. Connection to public water and sewer will be required if additional to what is already there by BVU. Screening would be required if the site redeveloped. The proposed map amendment should not impact the local school system. Should also not impact the local parks and recreation facilities and services. I do have, as far as emergency services, Fire Marshal Eric Blevins did make a comment that the location has hydrant coverage that would be consistent with commercial district distances and flows. Road frontage and access are consistent with commercial districting. Change would be acceptable. Bristol, Virginia Utilities had no comment on water, wastewater, or electrical utilities. Public transit rezoning should not adversely impact transit resources. Transit currently does not serve this area of the city. Government services, a map amendment will have a negligible impact on the provision of other government services. Garbage collection services will be addressed during the site plan review process. Police offered no comment on the application. Economic Development Director Mac Chapman did offer the following comment. There's been a business operating out of this location for years, and with the development of the area currently, it only makes sense to allow it to be rezoned to B3. And that is the end of the staff report.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. Nobody else signed up for public comment. Mr. Felty, if you would like to make any comments, you're more than welcome to. Hearing that no one else has signed up for public comment, what we'll do is I'll go ahead and close our hearing, and I'll ask the chair of the Planning Commission to close their hearing as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hereby close this public hearing.
Thank you. The next item of our agenda is resolution establishing the real property tax rate for fiscal year 2022-2023. No one signed up for public comment for this item. Staff report.
This resolution will set the tax rate in order for tax bills to be sent out for June 5th payment deadline. The resolution fixes a rate of $1.12 per $100 of assessed valuation for the calendar year 2022. No increase is proposed.
Okay. So we'll have the reading of the resolution.
I've got water, okay. Resolution of the establishment of real property tax rate for the calendar year 2022, whereas Section 15.2-2503 of the Code of Virginia requires the governing bodies of every locality in the Commonwealth to prepare and approve a budget for the ensuing fiscal year and to fix a tax rate for the calendar year no later than the first day of the fiscal year. And whereas the City of Bristol, Virginia collects real property taxes on a semi-annual basis, which requires that the tax rate be fixed by the governing body early enough to allow preparation of invoices for the first installment payment, which is due annually no later than June 5th. However, the tax rate for the personal property, machinery, and tools and other such taxes the City Council may impose shall be collected with the second installment of real property taxes, which are billed at a later date and due to be paid annually no later than December 5th. And whereas the City Council of Bristol, Virginia has received funding requests from the city's officers and heads of departments and agencies for the inclusion in the budget for fiscal year 22-23, and whereas the City Council has reviewed during work session meetings prior to the date of this resolution such requests and estimates of anticipated city revenues from local and intergovernmental sources for fiscal year 22-23, and whereas based on these actions, the City Council is prepared to fix the real estate property tax rate for calendar year 22, but will delay action to set the rate for personal property, machinery, and tools and other such taxes as the City Council may impose to a later date, but no later than the first day of the upcoming fiscal year. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Bristol, Virginia, that the unit tax levy on real property in calendar year 2022 is hereby set as follows. A citywide unit levy for general city purposes and school purposes of $1.12 per $100 of assessed valuation of all taxable real estate, mobile home, and public utilities at 100% of fair market value. Be it further resolved that the unit tax levies on the taxable tangible personal property, taxable machinery and tools, and other such levies as the City Council shall impose for the fiscal year 22-23 shall be set at the time of the adoption of the city budget, not later than June 30th, 2022, approved at the called meeting of the City Council. We need to reword that resolution, but approved at the regular meeting of the City Council for the City of Bristol, Virginia, April 12th, 2022.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the council?
Just to clarify, do we need to, when we make a motion, do we need to change the wording in the motion?
Just move to approve as presented with the exception that it is a regular meeting instead of a called meeting.
All right, I make the motion that we approve the resolution as presented with the exception of the change in the final line that it is a regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council. And that's my motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any council discussion?
I will say I'm appreciative that we did not have to consider raising the real estate tax rate this year. I've said previously I think it'd be good if we have a plan going forward to try and lower the real estate tax, you know, starting when we start getting some casino revenue. You know, whether it be the real estate tax or the personal property tax, I think it'd be good to make an attempt to lower that beginning very soon. We have other revenues coming in. And one other thing I'd like to clarify with you, City Manager, our personal property tax, we never set that the same day as the real estate tax. We've always in the past set that later after the real estate tax is set, correct?
In my time here, we've never set the property or machinery, personal property or machinery and tool tax at this time. It's always set when we adopt the budget.
Okay.
Yeah. Speaking of setting the rates, first want to thank you and Ms. Spradlin and everybody that put this budget together and getting it done in a timely fashion because, to your point, Mr. Osborne, when I first got on council, we were voting on the tax rate literally towards the end of June along with the resolution. It was creating some problems in getting the tax bills out if it changed. So this is really good. It helps get the information to the Commissioner of Revenue and the Treasurer's Office, and they can send out the tax tickets to give people plenty of time to get their payments in June. But I also want to kind of echo some of what Councilman Osborne said. You know, it's going into this budget, there's a lot of unknowns, and there's still a lot of unknowns as we move forward. You know, but to be able to come up with a budget that did not include a tax rate, I'm very appreciative, and I hope the residents are as well. And I feel optimistic that as we move forward in the coming years, once we get our handle on some of those unknown costs and begin to see what some of the new revenues that come in and get a handle on that as well, that we can bring the real estate tax rate down. I think everyone would like to see that, but again, you don't want to rush into it when you've got a lot of unknowns, or you don't know exactly what the new revenues, where they're going to kind of level out at. So I do think we can get there. I just, but for this year, I'm very grateful it stayed where it was, given the challenges we face. So thank you.
All right. If there's no further discussion, we do have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnum,
Yes. The next item of our agenda is a resolution authorizing the Industrial Development Authority of the City of Bristol, Virginia, to issue its lease revenue bonds. We have one person that signed up for public comment for this item, and that is Michael Pollard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The topic came up back when these school, I know it's not directly related, but it is a matter of, it's something that you will have to deal with at some point or another, not necessarily as part of the funding package that you're discussing right now, but it is on topic. I was wondering if it's been clarified as to whether the schools or the city and what funding mechanism would be used to cover the road between the new school and Suncrest. I know that road improvements would be a different matter, but there's a new road between the school and Suncrest that's part of the design, and I'm not entirely clear on whether that's part of the school funding package or if the city will have to come up with a funding mechanism for that later. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pollard. And we'll move on to staff reports.
Council, this action item is a plan of finance authorizing the Industrial Development Authority to issue up to $27,430,000 of lease revenue bonds to provide funds to finance all or portion of the cost to construct a new intermediate school. The bonds will be payable from money provided to the city, subject to appropriation by the City Council to the IDA under a financing lease among the IDA, School Board, and the city. Tonight, I have Bond Counsel, Ms. Megan Gillen here, and David Rose with Davenport and Company as well. Ms. Gillen's going to give an overview of the documents you have before you. I know there's a tremendous amount of documents, and she's able to provide you with some more detailed background information about those documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I will focus on the resolution tonight, and any questions that you all have on the documents I can answer in turn. As city manager started, the resolution before you is for the City Council in conjunction with the Bristol School Board and the Industrial Development Authority to each enter into resolutions authorizing a lease revenue financing for the new intermediate school. The bonds would be issued by the Industrial Development Authority. And the bonds would be payable subject to annual appropriation by City Council of general fund dollars. I will point out at this time that this financing does not impact the general obligation debt limit of the city. The security for the bonds would be the new school being financed, as well as the 3 existing schools that are being consolidated into the new intermediate school through a lease-back arrangement, where the city and school board would lease these facilities to the IDA, and the IDA would thereby lease the facilities back to the school and the city for their use, subject to the annual appropriation rental payments being made for debt service. The school board approved the resolution last week at their meeting on April 4th, and the Industrial Development Authority is being asked to consider their similar financing resolution at their special called meeting tomorrow. The resolution before you authorizes the execution of the financing documents that are being presented at this meeting, as well as the sale and issuance of the bonds by the Industrial Development Authority, with just a few parameters I'd like to specifically point out. The not-to-exceed aggregate principal amount for the financing will be $27,430,000. The bonds will be roughly 30-year bonds, so the final maturity will be 2053, and the true interest cost on the bonds would not exceed 4.75%. I'm happy to answer any questions on the resolution or the documents. Okay, thank you.
Well, I don't know if it's for Ms. Gillen or Mr. It was regarding the information that you had sent us about the terms, and some of those bonds were callable and not. I think in some of the information the city manager had sent us.
Yeah, Mr. Rose, it may be beneficial for you to answer. It's in regards to the terms of when bonds will be callable in the future as it relates to when some would be callable after the 10 years and the interest rates associated with that.
Again, Mr. Mayor, members of council, good to be here again tonight. David Rose, Davenport. So historically and traditionally, when the city has issued bonds, whether they're 20-year or 30-year in length or whatever, or something in between, the first 10 years have historically been we call non-callable. That's a protection for the potential bond purchaser, and that's what these bonds are set up as. Doesn't mean we can't call them early. It just means that basically the real economics and the benefit occur after the 10 years. Also doesn't mean that if we call the financing in early, we meaning the city can't get a benefit. It's just that those bond holders of the first 10 years will be guaranteed to have those interest rates there for 10 years. Everyone thereafter is subject to having their bonds called early, and as a result of that, we have the potential, if interest rates are favorable, to see those bonds be, if you would, exchanged for lower interest bonds like we've done with you in the past. So again, this is the traditional approach with regard to how the financings have typically been done. Nothing different here for you.
Thank you. That answered that question. Another question, and when I saw this, and I don't know which one of y'all wants to answer this. I asked Dr. Perigin the question when I saw the school board information. But in the collateral, it has the 3 current elementary schools as collateral, but it's my understanding that's only until construction starts.
Sure. So one of the options that the city and the IDA are considering is bond insurance, which would provide an additional level of security and maybe perhaps a better rate on the long-term financing. If it is determined that that is a good option for the city and the IDA, we expect the bond insurers would want collateral during construction in the new school. So the intent is for the 3 existing schools to serve as that collateral during construction, and then once the new school is placed in service, it would serve as the long-term collateral and security for the bonds.
And pointing out what would then happen is the collateral would transfer over. So those 3 schools would no longer have collateral, would no longer be securitized for these bonds. They would be freed up again.
And that was my concern when I first read that, to
Yes.
make sure that you weren't tying up the future of the other schools once they closed as security.
The documents include a concept for springing release, so that at that point, those 3 buildings or facilities would no longer be security.
If we don't have any further questions right now, we may in a little bit, but we'll have the reading of the resolution. And Mr. City Manager, is that by caption only?
Yes, this will be by caption only.
Okay.
Hold on. My computer's messing up, sorry. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Bristol, Virginia, authorizing the Industrial Development Authority of the City of Bristol, Virginia to issue its lease revenue bonds.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the council?
I move for approval of the resolution as presented.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Council discussion.
Well, I know the council has already approved for the school system to move forward on this. But once again, I'm going to say, I don't think the timing's right. We've got our legislators right now. Looks very favorable that there's going to be a lot of money set aside for renovation of schools and construction of schools throughout the state of Virginia. And once again, I think we need to slow down on this and see exactly what the legislators are going to do and how much we're going to qualify for, because you know that every rural county is going to get a good chunk of money for their school systems. And I'm just going to caution y'all to slow down. Let's wait and see what the legislators do. It's not going to be long before we know.
Well, you know, I was sitting here thinking about this the last few days, and this has been a long process. You know, I can remember when I took my son, who's now a freshman at the high school, to either the register for kindergarten or preschool. I think it's preschool over at the school board, which was then on Oak Street, to show you how long ago it was. And there was talk then, I think the school board had just started talking. Dr. Lindenberg was the superintendent at the time, and I wasn't on council, wasn't even thinking about it. But I asked him about the school and stuff, and you know, by the time this project finishes, as I said, that was when they were first talking about it, maybe the first year or so. He was getting ready to go to preschool. When this opens in 2 years, he'll be a senior in high school. That's how long it's taken us to get a school. So you think about, that's a whole generation, a cycle through the school system, let alone probably 2 people that have cycled through the elementary schools in the condition they're in. You know, we all know this needs to be done. We've talked about it and, you know, and I can't think of how many times we've talked about it over probably the last 6 years. Had meetings among the city council, joint meetings with the school board, meetings with the community. The school boards had information sessions with members of the community, taking them on a bus tour, what I call Dr. Peregrina's Magical Mystery Bus Tour, where we went and toured every site that had 10 acres or more in the city, trying to make this open, trying to find what the best alternative is. You know, the council, as far as the location, and, you know, again, I know there's people that don't necessarily like the location, but that is not our purview. That's the school board's purview to pick the location. And they've done a lot of listening. They've tried. I know they've considered a lot of different locations. Just you know, they just don't financially work. You know, looking at particularly locations in the center of the city, which I think we had one meeting and everybody said if money was no object, we would love to do that. And I think that is everybody's intent, but money is an object. And so we couldn't come up with a solution that worked. But they've come to a way to do this. When they first came to council, I remember, you know, the gist of the council members at the time was, if you can find a way to do this that doesn't impact our debt, then we're for this. And then as we went down that road, a lot of, well, have you looked at this? Have you considered that? Different ways to get there. I appreciate the Industrial Development Authority for considering this as a method. I think everyone agrees this is the most effective way to do this. It's the cleanest, it's the easiest. There are other ways we could have done it, but this is both the most effective and efficient, and it saves us money by doing so. I think that's the ultimate thing at the end of the day. It saves the taxpayers some money in doing this. You know, but every time, and I think this is the 3rd time we voted on this, and every time let's wait. The state's getting ready to do something. I remember 4 years ago, the state was getting ready to do something. I do believe they're going to do something. There are bills there right now. There will be money for school construction. How much? I don't know. It depends what the conferees do. How does that, could some of it be used for this? Maybe, maybe not. But the point is, we have more than elementary schools to deal with in our city. Once we get beyond the elementary schools, we have done a fairly good job with some renovations to the middle school, but the high school's coming down the road. We know that. That building, we talk about old buildings, Virginia High is an old building, and it has some issues. So the money that comes from the state will help us later on down the road get that facility up to where it needs to be. And then we can have facilities that are where they need to be and start doing what some of the people have said. And I don't disagree they're wrong. It's just we don't have the ability, is setting money aside, whether it's in a sinking fund or something along the way, to deal with maintenance issues and to prepare for what's coming down the road. This will be, if the IDA approves it and we move forward, a brand new school, the first in over 40 years in our city. But it's not going to be new forever. We know it's going to need maintenance. We know we should not fall 40 years from now. Our council shouldn't be here saying, why didn't somebody put money aside for maintenance or do the things that needed to be done, and face the similar decision that we are of trying to come up with a very creative solution to finance what should have been done decades ago. And that's what, we need to do as we move forward. In the short term, we need to, and Mr. Pollard brought it up about the traffic, and I think I know the answer, but I'd let Dr. Farragut, if he wants, answer that. But, we do need to look at traffic around Suncrest and Heritage. That's a concern that many residents have brought up, and if this passes, we've got, the clock's ticking. We need to figure out what needs to be there. I know they've looked at particularly maybe a light at Bonham Road, but I don't think that quite qualifies. But there are other things we can do to mitigate the impact of traffic in that neighborhood, to make it safe, to make it easy for people to get in and out. Another concern that's brought up that I think we need to start considering, and probably need to consider not just because of the school, but for other reasons, is transportation, and particularly extending the hours of our transit. That, a lot of people have said, well, I can't make it to an after-school event because I don't have a car and it's too far to walk. Public transit, that's a concern I've heard in the time I've been on council, that people can get to work but they can't get home, or vice versa. So we need to maybe look at that, and particularly with a huge employer that's going to be open 24/7, that kind of gives a little more justification to extending some of that transit as we look forward. But, as I say, we can come up and the state's going to do this or that, but I think the school board, I think bond council, everybody's done a good job. And the one thing I do know is if we wait, the cost of this is only going to go up. We've seen that since the last time we voted on and delayed it. The cost is going to go up, and that was before inflation ever hit. And so it's only going to go up. I think the school board has done a good job in negotiating a guaranteed maximum price. So we know what the maximum cost of that is, so we're covered there. We know, the other thing we know is if we wait, interest rates are going to go up. I mean, they've probably already gone up since we first talked about this to now, and everything I see, the Fed is going to very aggressively go up over the next few months. So again, we're locking in as good a rate as we can. So again, those are some of the unknowns and the cost of waiting. And I think doing this now, is it perfect? I think the first time we voted, I said it's not perfect, but don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think this is good. We've done our homework. We have a good plan that shows we're good stewards of the taxpayers' money, and we're moving forward to do something that will benefit our community for decades to come and help make it a place that people will want to live and have their families here. So I appreciate everybody that's got us to this point, and I hope council passes it tonight and IDA tomorrow, and we can start working very soon.
I'll echo a lot of what Councilman Hartley eloquently said. First, thank you to the folks at Davenport for the work you put into this specifically, and to the folks at the school board. Like he said, I don't know how many times we voted on this. I know this has been something that has been the entirety of my term on council. We've discussed this many times, and we've talked it to death, and this location, that location, this funding mechanism, that funding mechanism. But at the end of the day, we have landed on the most fiscally responsible way to pay for this, in a way that we know we can handle, in a way we know we can do it. And I do hope, as others have said, I hope that the state does do something, and I believe that they will. But building this new school is not the be-all, end-all. So therefore, that money from the state should not just be 100% poured into building this school, because the high school is old, as he said. The middle school is over 100 years old. Even though it's been renovated, it is a building that is over 100 years old. So we are fortunate that we have this option presented to us tonight. I'm hopeful that tomorrow that the IDA sees that as well, and sees it as the most responsible way for us to use taxpayer money to do an important public project. So I do look forward to voting on it tonight and passing it, and I look forward to its passage with the Industrial Development Authority tomorrow.
Well, I just wanted to say, I agree with what a lot has been said up here. When I first came on the council in November of 2018, we had a vote right then, and I voted no because I didn't think it was the right timing. And since then, of course, I've met with the superintendent, with the school board. I've toured all the school buildings, and of course, we've looked at other sites too to see what else was out there. Obviously right now our newest elementary school in the city is about 50 years old, and that's the newest building. The older ones are pushing 70, 80, 90 years old. And so there is some legislation that has some potential where we can have some more state funding. So I do like the idea of being able to take care of our elementary schools now with this plan. And if there's additional state funding later, then we focus that on the high school and the middle school. Obviously, some of our oldest buildings for our elementary schools, they do have asbestos and lead-based paint and radon, and they're not handicap accessible. The only handicap accessible building really is Van Pelt right now. So if you have a child in the city and they're handicapped, and you're in a certain school district and they have friends on the street, they're playing with their friends will go to one school, but your child may actually go to Van Pelt, a different school away from their friends in the neighborhood, because that's just the only handicap accessible building that we have. So to be able to build a new elementary school in the city of Bristol, we're able to say, every kid, every elementary age kid in Bristol, no matter what neighborhood you live in or what your parents do, what your background is, what your income is, you'll be able to go to a brand new, nice elementary school. That's a 21st century school. It's clean. It's got the latest security with surveillance and doors and windows. It'll be very safe. I think to be able to do that, it's a special time in the city, and I think we should be very proud of that. So I do appreciate all the work. Obviously, we've talked a lot with the school board. Some members are here, and Dr. Perigin, about trying to figure out what's best long-term for our city. So I'm happy we're at this point, and I hope we can keep moving forward. If, let's see, we had the reading of the resolution and a motion and a second. So if there's no further council discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
No.
Farnum,
Yes. Thank you all. The next item of our agenda is discussion of a short-term rental ordinance. Nobody signed up for public comment for this item. Staff report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So the second time we've seen this, and based on some of the comments last time, we did take another look at some of the definitions that were in there that were perhaps a little bit misleading. So we did reduce the number of definitions to kind of try to simplify what it is exactly that we are trying to accomplish. I just do want to run through the proposed regulations that the ordinance would impose on these types of rentals real quick again, just to refresh your memory. So basically the operator, which is the owner of a short-term rental, which are rentals that you would typically see on hosting platforms, Airbnb, VRBO, and others that are out there. So first, it would be no operator shall operate a short-term rental without the submission and approval of an application, which would list out the regulations. The application will register the property with the Community Development Planning Office and have an annual fee of $25 per property. Only the owner of the property would be able to operate the short-term rental. Completion of a business license from the Commissioner of Revenue's office. When I discussed this with the Commissioner of Revenue, she did say that that is the best and easiest, most efficient way to collect the lodging taxes would be through the business license process. So that's why that was included in there. Proof of homeowner's insurance with a minimum general liability coverage. If the unit is part of a homeowners association, then the operator must present proof that that is allowed per the HOA. Operators would be limited to a maximum of 10 rentals without additional approval. If an operator wishes to rent more than 10 units, a special use permit must be obtained. The reasoning behind adding this in there was to try to prevent perhaps an out-of-town group from coming in and buying up 100 or 200 properties, thus making the tight housing market that we have right now even worse. So it would give the city council a little bit more control over a certain limit. You'd have to have a minimum of one off-street parking space per unit. The occupancy, we discussed that was no more than 2 persons per bedroom. I think it came up at the last meeting that I did not hear any additional comments on that, but if, that also is something that could be discussed too. 1 booking per dwelling unit would be allowed. A safety inspection of the property would be performed by the city inspection office. Smoke detectors, fire extinguisher, and where natural gas or propane is present, carbon monoxide detectors must be installed. Accessory structures shall not be used for short-term rentals unless they have been previously approved as an accessory dwelling unit. So they basically have to be rated for residential use. Recreational vehicles cannot be used for short-term rentals. No signage or advertising the short-term rentals shall be allowed on site. The name and the telephone number of the operator shall be posted conspicuously within the short-term rental unit. The operator is responsible for addressing any problems associated with the rental. And as part of the registration process, the operator shall clarify that the short-term rental meets the requirements of this section. The application shall also provide that as part of the registration, the operator is agreeing to permit annual inspections of the rental at reasonable times and after notice has been presented to address complaints. Failure to permit such an inspection could be grounds for penalties or suspension. We do have a short section on suspension or cancellation if failure to collect or remit the lodging tax, 3 or more substantiate complaints within a 1-year period. A complaint would need to be in the form of telephone, email, regular mail, either to the Community Development Planning Office, police, or fire department. We want to make sure that it is a legitimate registered complaint and not just somebody who doesn't like the fact that there's one next door. And any other violations of any other requirement of the article. And that's pretty much the rundown of it.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Dietrich?
I have a couple. So on the suspension and revocation, so that would suspend or revoke their their permitting with us, basically, right? But, so, do we then reach out to Airbnb or whatever the platform is and say, hey, they're not legally allowed to do this? Or what prevents them from continuing to rent it under the table?
Well, the business license would be suspended. So, if they were to continue to do that, it would be a violation. But it would be a situation where we'd also reach out to the hosting platform too. I'm not sure off the top of my head right now if what they would do about that type of thing, what their regulations are on that, but that is something that we would.
Because I know that there have been other localities. I think maybe even Abingdon has
They do. They have
enacted.
one.
Do you, if you have some time before we do a final vote on this, if you could maybe ask some of these localities what happens with the platform, just out of curiosity.
Sure.
And then I had a question about the parking situation.
Mm-hmm.
A couple slide or a slide or two back, you said minimum of one off-street parking space.
Per unit, yes.
Yeah. So, would this adversely affect anybody who's trying to set up one of these Airbnbs, say on State Street, if they don't have any off-street parking? Would they still be able to get an exception and do this, or?
That's a good question. We might have to add that into the ordinance. Since the B2 district downtown does not have a requirement for off-street parking at all, that is something that we probably should incorporate into
'Cause
there.
I don't know what the loft situation is, but I'm sure there's some loft downtown that is only on-street parking theoretically.
Right. I mean, I know some of them in that area do lease parking, but I don't know for certain if they all do. Right.
So maybe there could be just some kind of, not take out the parking requirements altogether, but just something that says,
A B2 exception.
give us an exception because we don't have a yard, or we don't have a parking
Sure.
driveway or something, yeah.
Can I ask, is downtown the only place where that would conceivably happen?
It is the only district that does not have a off-street parking requirement. Yes.
Okay.
Well, we've got a lot of neighborhoods, older neighborhoods that has street parking, so that would eliminate all Airbnbs in those neighborhoods. You got Arlington Avenue and, that whole area over there is street parking. So that would,
Right. They would have to provide some type of parking. There could, like I said, if that is a concern, it is possible there might be able to be some type of exception based on topography or, location because of the size of the lot. Because you are right, some of those old sections of town, smaller lots, bigger houses, a lot less room to do much of anything on the property.
yeah, it's almost like they are gonna be penalized in those areas because there's no way for them to
Yeah,
achieve the
I get that.
off-street parking. And everybody that buys in that neighborhood and those neighborhoods like that, they know that it's street parking.
Yes. And yeah, I can look into that too and see if maybe there is some type of, perhaps they can make a request and it can be discussed. I wouldn't want to go through a big process like having to go to the planning commission or city council so we can get it resolved soon. I'll
Some
maybe
type
try
of
to find-
streamlined process.
Yeah,
like
because we don't
common
want to
sense.
hold anybody up from running a business.
'Cause it's one thing if, like Mr. Wingard said, if it's somebody on Arlington or wherever down there where there's physically no place for a driveway, but it's something else if it's, I live in Meadowcrest and hey, I want to be able to park 6 cars in front of my house for this too.
Right. There has to be a special circumstance, like no existing driveway or something to that effect.
Well, we need to have this policy in place that's fair to all without everybody coming in for special exemptions.
Yes.
We don't need to hear no more special exemptions. So the street parking needs to be addressed. And you said owner operator. Can you elaborate on that? Because I don't do Airbnbs, but from what I do understand about them is the person renting the Airbnb rents it through the Airbnb.
Correct.
They pay Airbnb. If there's any taxes levied on that, Airbnb collects them taxes and then forwards them on to the locality. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just double checking, because there are a few that do pay lodging taxes, from what I understand.
So you say owner operated. What are you saying there?
The property owner is the only one who can sign up to register the Airbnb. Like, you can't be renting a house and then decide you want to run the business of having the Airbnb. So
Okay.
you have to actually own the property to get the permit.
Okay.
And just to clarify, the only one booking per unit. So if you had a 5-bedroom house, you cannot rent individual 5 different bedrooms
Correct.
to 5 different guests. You can rent your one unit, which is the one house.
Right. Now, if you had 10 people, that's fine. It's still one booking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a duplex, you could rent out each side. When you go into renting one room at a time, you're looking more at what I would consider like a bed and breakfast or even a hotel type use.
Yep. Okay. And there's no action on this item tonight. It's just a discussion item. Okay.
And
Yes,
another issue
Sure.
is 2 occupants per bedroom. If they have kids, their kids are gonna be in the bed. So why would you have 2 occupants? Why would the city want to even put that stipulation in there? Is it any of the city's business how many people stays in a room? Because Airbnb, I'm sure, asks that question, how many people in this group?
Oh yeah,
I'm sure
fairly
that they
certain
do.
they do. Right. It was just more so that you aren't, from like a building code safety aspect, that you're not trying to cram too many people into one room for an occupancy.
Okay, even with that being said, there's no way for this city or any locality to police this. So why have it in there? You can't enforce it. You can't, your hands are tied. You're not gonna be able to prove anything. So why put it in there?
Well, like I said, if we put it in there, there are quite a few people that will follow it. I know we can't police everybody, but there are a lot that will follow the rules. They will sign off that that's what they will do, and if they are discovered, then they could potentially have their license suspended.
So you're gonna penalize the owner for something that an occupant done? You
Well,
just
if he's
said
renting it
penalize
to-
them to pull their license.
No, I see your point. I see
So
your
you're
point.
gonna penalize the owner for something an occupancy person done that the owner has zero control over. He does not, or she does not rent those units, those houses.
What the
It is
owner
all-
does rent them.
It is all done through the apps these days.
Right,
I
but
can-
the owner does know how many people will be staying in his place when they rent.
The owner won't know nothing other than the party showing up at this certain date and time and the unit has to be ready.
That's not necessarily
No.
true, because I've rented from Airbnb and VRBO, and I think every time I've rented from one of those units, the owner has a separate agreement that the renter has to sign prior to checking in at the property. I know at least that's been on my 2 or 3 occasions that I've used a VRBO or an Airbnb. I've signed a separate agreement with the owner, not with Airbnb, not with VRBO, but with the owner, that I'm gonna abide by certain rules and regulations. So, now, I completely agree with you in regards to the fact that we cannot police that. But, I do know owners have certain rules and restrictions that they have, at least in the places I've rented. I haven't rented one in Bristol. I don't know if anybody in Bristol has those types of restrictions or not. I know, you know, Mr. Shu, I know, represents, or has at least one Airbnb here, 3, I'm sorry. So, you know, he may be best qualified to tell us, at least in his experience, how that works for him.
And usually when you go to rent, it'll just say the maximum number of people, not necessarily based on bedroom, because they could have other areas, or
Right.
some bedrooms may have multiple beds in it, depending on what you're looking at. It'll
Right.
just say maximum occupancy 5 or 10, whatever.
Let me ask you, kind of thinking of both of those things, the way that the way that you answered Mr. Wingard's question was that it was more for like a safety and overcrowding. The way that I read that, the way I heard that initially was to prevent against like a big house party type situation. Would there be any way to maybe reword it just to say, instead of people per bedroom, kind of like Ms. Nave said, you can only have X number of people in the house based on maybe the square footage of the house or something, or?
I think the easiest way to handle this is that each owner of a VRBO or Airbnb would have to have certain rules and regulations that pertain to their property specifically, and then that allows the owner the opportunity and the leasee to review those rules and regulations and see if if the leasee wants to abide by it, and then the city's out of it.
Okay.
That's-
All right. You personally own several, I would like to hear your side.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And I'm chair of the planning commission and also was on the committee to help draw these things up. And I can answer a lot of your questions. If you don't mind, I'll take just a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll address first the parking issue, and that was kind of a discouragement. As you said, when people move onto streets with no parking, they know what they're buying. And this would also be intended for the Airbnb owners. So if you're gonna open an Airbnb on a street with no parking, there's hardly any parking anyway. Like Park Street, for instance, we have a triplex over there, and we have to make sure that each renter has one car because I don't wanna interfere with the other neighbors and how they live. So hopefully that would discourage an Airbnb owner from purchasing a property on one of those streets. But you know, you do have a great point, you know, that can be an issue, especially downtown. As far as room occupancy, that is something that Airbnb covers. In your house rules, you can say that you don't want any more than 2 people per bedroom. And it is hard to police, but again, that's to try to discourage a party house, because you could have like solar where it's mostly single family Victorian houses, and all of a sudden on race weekend you have 30 people in a house and people drunk hanging over the porch, and you know, it's just sort of to discourage that.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Okay, I understand that. All right, now, are you, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, I mean, because, you know, it's personal business.
That's okay.
It's your personal business. But does Airbnb take care of all of your check-ins and all of that, or does the occupancy people show up and you meet them, you give them a key? How does it work on your end?
They request a booking, so we have to approve it, and we see, they tell us how many people are staying, and we can approve it or not. And my wife was so thorough because we were not out to make money, we were out to improve neighborhoods, and part of that is having some of these properties be vacation rentals. And so she's so obsessed with that, she even messages them still and says how many people are coming, because, you know, we don't want a big party to happen there. And parking issues also she wants to know about. But yeah, it is up to the owner of the establishment to accept who books. And Airbnb is only sort of a middleman, but and so, you know, sort of like small hotel owners in a sense. Just like Expedia would, you would book through them, but the hotel handles your booking. I mean, you know, handles your stay and knows who's coming, etc.
Okay.
So,
And they can grade you, or just as much as you can grade them. If you
Oh,
get,
absolutely.
if you get a group in that throws a party, trashes your house, you're back on with Airbnb, and they get dinged, and
They can become removed from Airbnb. They
Yeah.
can possibly be fined, I believe. And you can also leave a review that would create a situation where no one else would lease to them again.
okay, well, that's the way I understood it to work.
All right. And there was one more thing, and I can't remember exactly what it was. I thought I could say something about that.
oh, wait a minute.
Oh, it was the owner owning the Airbnb also. I know that wasn't discussed heavily, but I did want to clarify that, because not only do we own them, but we try to stay in them also, and we've been all over the country in them. And there was one in, I believe it was Charlotte, and it was like a 250 unit apartment building that one person leased every property in there and made an Airbnb hotel, and they could legally do that. And so you know, the city had a housing issue on top of that. I can't prove this, but we stayed in it, and my assumptions by watching what was happening was that's exactly what was going on there. And so I brought this up to Mr. Dietrich, that possibility could become a real issue here. And also out-of-town people that have never even been to Bristol, operating Airbnbs and, you know, never even seeing what condition the property's in and things like that. So that's a really big, important issue in all this.
Okay, so you take issue with that if somebody owned a big apartment complex and wanted to do every one of the apartments an Airbnb?
I think that helps create a housing issue.
Okay, but as a private owner, I mean, and private investors, that's what their job is, to fix problems in the community. If there's a housing shortage, then there's a demand for other entrepreneurs to come in and build houses.
If there's room.
There's always room. America is big. But I just have issues that when you go to do something, it's hard to get one size fits all. But everything needs to be fair to everybody as best as possible. And there lies the problem. So I still, in my mind, I think the city is still at a crossroads with a lot of homework to do, because we don't need to exempt the Arlington Park Street area and just, you know, look at it and say, well, sorry, you bought in that location, deal with it. That's not the way to handle that. And if somebody does own an apartment complex that, let's face it, drugs are everywhere, crime is up, and they're having troubles with the tenants in that building. And they say, okay, well, this is just a drug-infested area over here, and it just seems like it's just attracting them. You're going to shut this thing down. Now, what's the options? Let it sit there and rot, or repurpose it?
We are actually doing that on Spencer Street. We bought a 4-unit building, and it will be vacation rentals, just exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
And we can do that because each unit can be an Airbnb under this.
Okay, but why would we want to tie that owner's hands of that apartment complex and take his ability or her ability to repurpose that away from them?
I think they can, as long, if this is passed, as long as there are no more than 10 units that they own.
No, I'm saying if it's 12, 14, 16, 20 apartments. I mean,
I think, if you don't mind me going on, I will make this brief, but, and I appreciate you allowing me to speak about this. But we were also sort of looking at it as, I don't know what was done, and I don't know what the answer is, but, you know, so many houses in the city were subdivided long ago, and that created some issues like you were speaking of in neighborhoods. And so, you know, if there was a regulation then, we might not have that issue today, sort of thinking that nipping this in the bud is helpful.
I would just listen to this. I mean, to me, if you're going to take an apartment, a complex, what I'd say, you know, you had 10 units in one building, say, then, you know, right now it had to be in an area that's zoned multifamily, or 3 or 4 or whatever.
Unless it was grandfathered in, yes.
Yeah, but if you're doing that as under a business, you're basically running a hotel, which it should be zoned as a business. I mean, you're changing the land use there. To me, that's more the distinction is, you know, if you wanted to do that way, then you'd have to get it rezoned. I think this is to allow people to operate this in a residential area without going through the rezoning process. Is part of why we're coming up with this, is to try to find a way to offer this service to people that are coming to our community, but yet doing it in a way where you don't have to go through a rezoning process every time. Is that?
Yeah, and so that there can be some basic guidelines and some rules as far as that goes, yes.
Yeah, but your apartment houses are not, and I may be wrong on this, but I would say that the majority of apartments are in R zonings, not B.
I would go along, I believe most of them
So
probably
this
are.
Airbnb is for R zones, not B. Whether it's R1, R2, R3, whatever. So an apartment complex that needs to be repurposed because of whatever reasons, I don't think we should be tying their hands saying that they don't qualify because they've got 11 units instead of 10.
Well, and I think that, like the thing says, I think you could get a special use permit if there was a very specific circumstance like that, you know, like if somebody has 15 units and they're fixing them all up all at once, they want to have them all Airbnb because they're right next to the casino, you know.
Correct,
I mean, that's something you could do a special exception for.
correct.
Well, I'm of the mindset that if we pass this, it needs to be for R zoning regardless if it's R1, 2, or 3. It's R, it's residential. Whether it's a single dwelling or whether it's a duplex or whether it's a triplex or whether it's an apartment complex. As long as it's in an R zoning.
Well, I think this has been some good discussion, and we've got a lot of things to take back to the
Yes,
Planning
thank you
Commission.
for allowing me to speak.
And thank you, Mr. Shu, as a Planning
Thank
Commission
you. I
member for,
appreciate you coming and speaking
yeah.
to us.
Absolutely.
Sure, we'll make some updates and we'll come back.
The next item of our agenda is another discussion item, discussion of proposed ordinance to update City Code Section 50-242 definitions and Section 50-32, 3, permitted uses in a B3 district. Nobody signed up for public comment for this item. Staff report.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, this has also been before you. This would be to add definitions to the zoning ordinance. The two definitions that would be added would be a cannabis dispensing facility, otherwise known as a medical marijuana facility. It'd be a facility that's obtained a permit, permit from the Board of Pharmacy pursuant to state code and owned by a pharmaceutical processor, dispenses cannabis products produced by a pharmaceutical processor to a registered patient, his registered agent, or if such a patient is a minor or an incapacitated adult as defined in Code of Virginia, such patient's parent or legal guardian. We would also add pharmaceutical processor, which means the facility that has obtained a permit from the board pursuant to Code of Virginia and cultivates plants intended only for the production of cannabis oil, botanical cannabis, usable cannabis, produces cannabis products, and dispenses the products to a registered patient. So basically, the state has legalized medical marijuana, as everyone knows. We did have one of the pharmaceutical processors in Bristol for a short time, Dharma, before they moved up to Abingdon when the casino came into the same property. There are one pharmaceutical processor per health service area in the Commonwealth. And Abingdon is the one, and they can license up to 5 cannabis dispensing facilities where, much like a pharmacy, you get your prescription from a doctor who's registered in the program in Virginia. You go there, you get a supply of medical marijuana. When it's over, you go back and get another prescription. Currently, it's very much like a pharmacy, but as you know, within the next couple of years, recreational marijuana is scheduled to be approved, and we may or may not want those locations, or we might want to regulate where those locations go. It's possible that a current cannabis dispensing facility becomes one of those recreational marijuana facilities, and then they're already possibly in a place that maybe is not appropriate according to the city council or to somebody else. So we're wanting to try to add these definitions to the city code and then determine the best locations they could go. So what I brought you before was that they would be able to be added in a B3 district, and both the cannabis dispensing facility and the pharmaceutical processor. The first ordinance I brought to you said that they would be located a minimum of 1,000 feet from any public or private school and public licensed daycare center. 1,000 feet shall be from front door to front door. After some discussion at the last meeting that we discussed this at, I sent everyone some maps to show not only 1,000 feet from the schools and daycares, but also 1,000 feet from churches that would be in B3 districts. Also, I did a 500-foot map of each one of those uses, and I believe those are in your packet as well.
Does anyone have any questions about this for Mr. Dietrich?
Can you pull the map?
Can you
up,
put
Do
the
you have the
maps
last
up on?
one? I didn't have the 500s on there, but I do have the thousands.
It's hard to see on the.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had some
Yes, I'm
issues
getting
trying to
old.
get something on there, and it just wouldn't work.
There should be maps in the agenda packet.
Was it for, I'm sorry, let me go over here and ask.
I didn't get it. Big stack of stuff.
We didn't come prepared.
Here's school daycare 1,000, and then that's school daycare 500. That's 500 feet. And then this was church, school, and daycare. 500.
They're there, it's just kind of slow in getting them.
Thank you.
Right, that was the daycare and schools, that was 1,000 feet. The red is the B3. So it would basically eliminate anything within that red, that circle that also would touch the red B3 area. This is the 1,000-foot, excuse me, with the churches from the B3 area. There are obviously more churches and daycares and schools. It's just if they didn't touch a B3, I didn't include it in there. So, and that's if you include the 1,000 from churches, schools, and daycare. That leaves you with what's left in the red. The 500 feet, I didn't, like I said, I was having trouble attaching those. That's why I sent them to you in the agenda packet.
Okay, can you tell us what the setback is for the ABC stores for the churches, schools, and daycares?
There is none.
There is none. I mean, 'cause I'm just sitting here thinking, you may make it so stringent that they don't even qualify to move into the city for a dispensary. I mean, right across the street here, you got church. You can't make it 1,000 feet till there's another church. And then you can't make it 1,000 feet from that church because of school, even though the school's not open yet. It's BI College been shut down, okay? I mean, we have churches and schools on every corner in this city. I mean, think about it. We got churches and schools all over.
Right, and the original, what's in front of you was just the daycare and the school. Well, that was the original intent.
And
Yeah, I
I'll
would
also
venture-
say, I don't think we had a consensus among council to include churches as one of the restrictions either. I think it appeared everybody was okay with schools or daycares, but I don't believe we had a consensus that churches should be added to that restrictive list.
Okay, so daycares. Okay,
That would be the school and daycare map right there that I have up right now. That would be the 1,000 feet.
And I would venture to say, am I correct? I think that I heard one time that we're one of the only localities in Virginia that has an ABC store so close to us, down at Stonewall Jackson,
I'm not
a
sure.
couple hundred feet, and it doesn't hurt anything. It seems to continue. They both continue to operate independently of one another.
Mm-hmm. Of course, it also, like I said, the medical, will be just like a pharmacy as far as you'll still have the same types of controls.
I know when you brought this before us last time, you discussed the total number of operator licenses that would be issued. And I know it's a very limited number in the state, correct?
400, I believe, is the initial, at least at first. Is that what it? I think it was, because I sat in on something, a webinar on that. It was 400 throughout the entire Commonwealth would receive a recreational marijuana license, yes.
Do you remember if they break that down by congressional district or
Did not say.
locality? Okay. I certainly think, as far as these maps go, when you get into these 1,000-foot maps, and especially you get into the 1,000-foot with a church, school, and a daycare, it becomes incredibly restrictive, and you're very limited in where you can go. And I think this is just basically like Linden Drive area is the only place that we would allow that to happen, if I'm looking at this map correctly.
That B3 districts?
Yeah.
Exit 5, exit 7.
Yeah.
Gate City Highway, parts of Euclid Avenue, the commercial part of Euclid Avenue are your main B3 districts.
Yeah, but on this church, school, daycare, the only place where you have any discernible room is all up here.
Yeah.
For the 1,000 feet. So I think it becomes incredibly restrictive. It may be because of the limited number of operator licenses. We might not even get one in the city theoretically. I think we will, but we might not. But if we do, there'll be some revenue generated, obviously, and we shouldn't make it completely impossible for them to set up business here.
Yeah, so
That was the intent, as to not to do that, when we just included schools and daycares.
I guess really what we need to hear is whether or not there's a consensus on adding churches to the restrictions, which I have not heard that there's a consensus on that before. There may be a consensus on that tonight, though. And whether or not to restrict it to have no restrictions as far as distance from a school or a daycare, or 500 or 1,000 feet is kind of what we're looking for, so that when we draft the ordinance, we can basically have that in final form before you get the first reading.
well, I'm perfectly fine with 500 feet.
I would agree with Mr. Wingard. I think 500 feet is plenty enough space. I think that's, and honestly, I think the only concern that I have that, I'm okay with 500 feet is traffic, depending on what kind of heavy traffic it might bring to an area, not any kind of other danger necessarily. So I think the traffic is the main thing. I think 500 feet is good.
of just school or school and church?
Schools and daycares.
School and daycare right
daycares.
now. I haven't heard a consensus that churches need to be added to this unless that's changed in the past month.
I would still like to see churches added. I think if you do, you definitely need 500 feet. And I think and I appreciate Mr. Dietrich getting these maps to us, because it really does help you see just how limiting you can be, and even the 1,000 foot. I think 500 feet is sufficient. I would prefer to see churches myself.
Well, I'm okay with just 500, just schools and daycares, without churches.
Okay, I think
Yeah.
we've heard what we need to hear, I think, to move forward.
Thank you.
Well, if there's no other comments or questions, we'll Move on to our next item of our agenda, approval of extension of closing date from April 19th, 2022 to June 30th, 2022 for tax map numbers 90-1112, 190-1112, 190-1113, 190-1114, and a portion of 190A4. No one signed up for public comment. Staff report.
Council, I can't remember if this is the third or fourth extension that we've had on this one parcel of property before you. However, this afternoon I have personally seen the signature that we need to move forward in regards to the plat associated with this property. The next step will be drafting the deed of easement, and once that is done, this property should be able to close on relatively quickly. I would ask that we do extend it to June 30th of 2022. Simply in the event there's something else that pops up between now and then, I do not want to have to bring this back. But based on seeing today's signature and based on the fact that I know the plat will be recorded tomorrow, I think we can move this along relatively quickly.
Okay. All right. Thank you. What's the pleasure of the council?
I move for approval of the extension of the closing date from April 19th, 2022 to June 30th, 2022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any council discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to extend that for 365 days because I believe this is the fourth time it's been before us, and Mr. Hartley, I know twice has said is the allotted time enough to resolve this issue, and it has been proven twice in a row that it is not. So I make the motion to back that motion up to do 365 days.
Well, if it takes another 365 days, I just don't know what we'll need to do, but I'll leave that up to council. We can extend it for 365 days if council so chooses.
If they close within that timeline, we're good. We keep it going.
I was gonna ask, although you did say you feel confident, but it's Mr. Wingard
probably
pointed out
felt
the
confident
third or
before,
fourth
too.
time.
Right.
Do you think this is sufficient? I mean, I would like to think so, but I do wanna commend the property owners for their patience through this process, that they're hanging with it, so that's a good sign, but I mean, I'll leave it up to the others, but I have no problem extending it beyond that, just because I'm tired of asking that same question, is this sufficient enough time? And I know
Well, if I could
it's out
tell-
of your hands,
If
but
I could tell
still.
the future, I would have bought like the lottery tickets when it's $1 billion and had picked those numbers, and I wouldn't be sitting here tonight having this discussion. Can't tell the future, but you know, if council wants to extend it beyond June 30th, I'm okay with that too.
Let me ask you, so you've seen the paper that's got the signature?
Yes.
You're 1,000,000% sure that there's no other holdup in that department?
I'm marking this down.
I've never said there's 1,000,000% certainty. He asked if there was 1,000,000% certainty.
Are we 1,000,000% certain?
I'm not 1,000,000% certain.
Well, you know, this is, I think everybody knows what this lot is going to be, and I'm on the record, I went on the news, and my quote was, "People love to eat waffles," so I'm passionate about this. So I'm going to retract my motion, and I am going to make a motion that it is extended till April 19th, 2023.
All right,
But I would like the pressure to be on them, because
Okay.
I want my waffles, please.
all right. We'll try to get it closed before when, 19th of 2023.
I second that.
If we can't, we need to get out of the real estate business.
All right. Well, if there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second.
Who seconded that?
Mr.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't see any harm with
All right.
extending it, so. If there's no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnum.
Yes. The next item is our consent agenda, and at the beginning, we pulled out items 10 and 11. So this is the consent agenda, items 1 through 9, and 12 and 13. What's the pleasure of the council?
I move for the consent agenda, items 1 through 9 and 12 through 13 for approval as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Farnum.
Yes. Okay. Now we're looking for a motion for approval for items 10 and 11 of the consent agenda.
Can I make a motion to table items 10 and 11 indefinitely?
I would second that.
All right, a motion and a second to table items 10 and 11. Clerk, please call the roll.
Hartley,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Osborne,
Yes.
Wingard,
Abstain.
Farnum.
Yes. That's the last item of our agenda. If there's no further business, we stand adjourned.